it's really good to talk about it, like let it out and just say like, you know what, I really don't like the way my shoulder blade looks on that side. And maybe you can tell that to someone that you trust. And shockingly, a lot of people will not even see those things. I was going to study neurosurgery. So going back to that.
That's crazy, by the way.
Crazy.
I'm Maddie.
I'm Azhani.
It girls. Maddie Berezowitz Azhani Tealer.
I'm Lit Girl. Podcast with a couple it girls.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lit Girl. Podcast with a couple it girls. Lit Girl.
Welcome back to another episode of It Girls. And guys, we have a surprise for you. Normally, we've been interviewing athletes and college athletes, but we have a major shift in our production. And so we're excited to introduce a businesswoman and someone I'm really lucky to call friend, Andrea Nucete-Elliott. Did I pronounce that right?
Look at that accent.
Yeah, thank you. And I've had the pleasure to know Andrea for 5-6 years now, since Mexico a long time ago. And
I think so, yeah.
And she's just unreal, and I'm so lucky to get to know her and for her to get to share her story with you guys. And so, Andrea, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're about, and we'll get into it.
Okay. Born in Venezuela, so born in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. I was raised on a Caribbean island a little east from Aruba. My grandparents and my parents were immigrants from Europe after World War II. So I like to say I'm a mutt. My family, it's a little bit from the Amazon and a little bit from Italy. So I have a very interesting mix. When my grandma was sick, I was around 11 years old. So we moved back to Italy, her home country, and I went with them. They were kind of like the people who raised me. After completing my lyceum, which is our high school over there, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. So I wanted to do that in the United States. I was playing volleyball over there, but I didn't speak English, and I didn't know that the US didn't have a pro league at the time. So I kind of grabbed some of my cash savings, the other volleyball savings I had. I didn't think, I always thought about them as put them and forget them just in case there's an emergency. So I just grabbed my money, came over here, and started my life. I had to learn, a lot of things.
Cut out a little bit.
NCAA, there's not a pro league. Do I want to do neurosurgery? How does a loan work? I had no idea. It was so expensive. I was going to go to either MIT, Stanford, Brown, Harvard. So when I saw the tuition cost, I was like, no, thanks. So I went to community college.
Yeah.
And I started to, to get my base and my core classes done. And then I ended up transferring to the University of Texas, graduated in 2017, took over TIY, which is the business that I run now, and started playing beach volleyball because there wasn't an indoor league. So
wow.
That's a whole lot of things in all places. But that's a summary of kind of the last 32 years of my life.
Man.
Oh my gosh. Andrea, I think what's kind of cool, and just to give your audience some background, we always ask our guests before they come on, is there anything that you want to share? What's your story? Are there any fun facts? All these things, just so we can get a better grasp to hopefully, our whole goal, mine and Z's goal of this podcast is just to show the guests in the light that they want to be shown. And Andrea was kind enough she has a 9-page document about her life story. And Z and I reading it, it was fascinating. And, you called yourself a mutt, but how cool that you have the culture of Venezuela, of what was the island that you lived on in the Caribbean called? La Margarita. I love that. And then in all Italy and Venezuela. So let's go in chronological order a little bit. So you were born in Venezuela, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So walk us through that a little bit. I know Z and I, we visited Brazil when we were freshmen in college, and you talked about in your writing the what do they call it? Favelas, right? Of Brazil, and how it was kind of similar to Venezuela. So just talk us through Venezuela a little bit first.
So it's a very, like anything, Venezuela is the first country of Central America. You know, it borders with Colombia, it borders with Brazil. So a lot of all the things in South America, especially the first countries, received a lot of influx from slave trade and from immigrants all throughout history, especially after the discovery of the New World. So we see a lot of flavor there. I'm pretty sure you guys got a good sense of that when you went on a visit and on your foreign trip. But there's a lot of livelihood. There's a love for music. People are smiling all the time. People are open with each other. You know, you live really, really close. So the cities are very dense. Where I was born, actually, we don't call them favelas because that's in Portuguese, but we call them barrios. And that's like my family. I was lucky. My family in my first years of my life was very, very wealthy. So I didn't have, you know, I was born in a place that was a third world country, but my family didn't have necessarily those, you know, those needs, but all my neighbors were. I'm an only child. I'm the only female in my family. So my neighbors were, you know, people that didn't have much. So I would share all the time things that I had, that I was lucky enough to have. But my best memories are like playing outside with what we had, what the rain would bring down and what we would find on the beach. And making things was always a good thing. We had like a race. We lived a little bit on a hill, and every now and then we'll build like a little cart and we'll just launch ourselves from the hill, and we'll like make races with random wheels, and like we'll fall over, and like we had the dogs on them. So it was really, really fun in a very humble way. It was always a party. It was super loud all the time. And around 1999, the president changed. So the political situation was, you know, declining often. Oftentimes, like, you don't see that change in countries that fast. But when Chavez got into the presidency, families all of a sudden got into political unrest. People that had a lot of money, like my family, started to be in danger. There was a socialism eradication from everything that was private. My family was in real estate. So my grandpa went there when he was 19 years old, and my grandma was 15. So they were...
Wow.
So she jumped in a boat by herself after he had gone, because my great-grandfather from Italy would not let her go if she wasn't married.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
So this love story is actually super, like, what was set my example for mine. He went ahead because his brother had gone, and they started working in construction, and then he sent the money for like the boat ride, the transatlantic boat ride, twice. Because the first time my great grandma stole it and didn't give it to my grandma. She was 16, like 15. Gosh. So she was told, "You're not leaving, you're not married." So my grandma staged a marriage with an uncle so that she could leave. So it's hilarious.
Wow. That's crazy. So they staged the marriage so they both could live in Venezuela.
So my grandma staged a marriage with
Sorry, my delayed.
of her promised fiance so that she could leave. So she went to her dad and said, "You know, I'm married now. I gotta go. You know, I know he sent me the money." Like all this, I wish I could have some collection of documents of this because it's incredible. So she jumped on the boat with one of her aunts, and 21 days later, she got to Venezuela, and then she started working in a hostel while my grandpa was doing construction, and then she was cleaning. So she was like leading the Airbnb and cleaning that and managing all the finances. And then they did well over time. So they built, what they called the fortune of the 60s, 70s, and 80s in South America. People, accumulated a lot of money, and it was very lucky for my family. But when things got bad politically and my grandma got sick, I was 11 years old, and she made a call to go. So to give you perspective, in my childhood, I was mainly with my grandparents and my mom in and out of my life. She was the third of the family, and she didn't really want to have me. She made that very clear when I was a kid. So she's mentally ill, which is actually very, she's non-diagnosed because she's in denial of it. But everyone that knows her, me included, we've been trying to get her help, and it's been very, very difficult for the family to deal with her. But she's been declining, and she's been spiraling since I was a baby. After she divorced my dad, things where I was 2, so things went south fast. She's had moments of, greatness, but she's had moments of really, really bad episodes that then I was the only one to blame. I was an only child, and she was in and out, as I said. And, she had a strong influence in the way I see life now, for good reasons and for bad reasons. But it's funny that we're doing this interview on Mental Health Awareness Month, because it's important that we think about those things.
So, not to interrupt you, Andrea, but I saw in your story, I think yesterday or today, that you said you saw her for the first time 7 years ago, or 7 years today.
So no, I spoke to her for the last time 7 years ago at my grandma's funeral, after my grandma passed away. So we had in my family, well, now my family is Jared and I, but in our family, we had in 2016 3 deaths in 5 weeks. Wow. That were really, really hard.
My gosh.
Yeah. So my grandma was April 2nd. His nephew, who was 19 at the time, committed suicide May 2nd. And today, in 2016, my dad passed away.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. And you were still in school at that point, right? You were at UT?
Yes. I was in my junior year at UT.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gosh.
And that's just
trying to balance all of that.
For the whole summer of 2016, I was like, okay, who else is going to call me now?
Man, I'm sure.
Wow.
And all this
can't even
just
imagine.
happened, like, when you were living in Venezuela. Like, we haven't even gotten to you moving to Italy, right?
Yeah. So when I was 9, my grandma left because she got really, really sick. She was diabetic. She was overweight. She was, she didn't take care of herself very much. And that type of journey will accompany her the rest of her life. So I stayed with my mom on the island for 2 years. Those years were really intense because I had as a 9-year-old better memory than when I was younger. And those years were really hard for me until one day I was in 5th grade. I will never forget. And from one day to another, she was like, "We're going to Italy tomorrow." And I was like, "What?" Like, "What do you mean?" She's like, we're moving to Italy. So, I wasn't granted a graduation in 5th grade or whatever. And those things will then present themselves later in life for me, as never celebrating. I didn't walk when I graduated. I didn't have anyone for my high school graduation. So like that stuff presented itself over and over and over until, later in my 20s, I was like, okay, we gotta address this. So.
Right. Okay. We'll talk about moving. You moved.
Wow. So talk. Yeah. Sorry, Z.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Mad.
Nope. You got it.
Andrea, for one, I know that you're extremely educated. Like you are very smart for one, but you're extremely educated. So moving from Venezuela to Italy is like a whole thing in itself, but you had to learn a whole new language and culture, all that stuff. I saw that you said like we drink wine when we're cooking and we drink wine at the desk and all these culture shifts. So talk about the culture difference between those two places.
So I went from being kind of like a wild thing. I was always barefoot. I would shower in the rain. I would be on the beach with my dogs. And kind of like what you would think living in Hawaii 100 years ago. Like South America is very behind in development and in technology. I didn't have my first cell phone until I was probably like 14. So I didn't have until like my last year of living in Venezuela. So I went from that, which has its formative, value for me, to going to, I moved to a town that I was the darkest person in the town. I was the tallest person in the town. I was different. It was a very small town. Yeah. So everyone kind of like looked at me like I was an exotic animal to come watch. So I didn't realize it at the time. But looking back, there were so many things that, as a kid, you don't see. I came from a family that was very colored in any way or form. I had, uncles that looked like you, Z, and then I had, cousins that looked like you, Maddie. And for me, there were never, they weren't different. We were all related, and we were, we weren't the same. We were just all human beings having part of the same family. So moving to Italy, that was different. So that was different because I didn't speak Italian. I moved there June 2nd, 2002. And that was the day that the euro was, and I remember that just because the euro became the official currency of Italy that day.
That's crazy.
And I got there at night, and I remember being really excited on my car ride from the airport to the little town I moved to, because it said Interport. So I thought I was next to the ocean. Yeah, no. I was not. It's a very small town. I slept on the kitchen floor of my apartment for 3 years. So all my middle school, I had to learn Italian, and the Italian education system is very different than the American or South American that is modeled after the American education system. So we go to school on Saturdays.
Goodness gracious.
And,
what?
Yeah. So the education system in Italy is very, very thorough. We have a full extra year of education, and even the tests are different. Everything is an oral examination. You get called out. You got to stand up behind the chair and talk to your professor for an hour, and it was very, very different. So I was terrified. Yeah. I didn't speak Italian. So when my grandparents were from very humble oranges, so they spoke the dialect to me. When I was in Venezuela, my grandma would just put bits and pieces of things like, hey, grab that, and hey, grab that. Almost if we were to compare it to a Creole dialect. Yeah. So in Louisiana, they have French influence and also, a very deep African influence. And those two mix that an English speaker does not understand what they're saying. Right. Same for me. So I spoke that dialect at the time. I speak it today, but I didn't understand Italian. Yeah. As you guys know, and you hear it when you go visit. So I had to learn. I remember having a book, a summer 5th grade book that my madrina gifted me. She's like, well, we gotta get you ready for middle school. I was like, huh? So I had I was 11. I had no time understanding. I had no planning. Summer is happening. I was confused. Everyone was touching me all the time, and Italians are very touchy feely, so they were squeezing your cheeks and feeding you food, and I was just oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed. I missed the ocean. I missed so many things at the beginning, and then making friends was really hard for me at the beginning, especially, how girls are when they're 11, 12, 13.
Right.
Yeah.
And be really mean to each other. And I had never had a sister. My friends weren't like really girls. So I would make friends with the boys easy because, you know, I was used to that. All my cousins were boys and all my friends were majority of them boys. So that wasn't very well seen in a very small traditional.
Right.
So I had to deal with development, and it was very hard. It was very, very difficult until I started to, you know, like navigate how that society worked. It was something that never really left me until I became like in my early 20s before leaving and moving to the US. So it was very, very, very difficult thing, you know, that like undermined my confidence as a young girl. And, you know, that paired with, I had a major change of sports. I played tennis, and then my mom withdrew me from it before my first professional event. So I had to adapt, and a volleyball coach saw me walking on the street, and he asked me if I was an athlete, and he invited me to one of the practices. And I got the bug of it because I was so bad. I was bored. But also,
no ball control at that point, right?
No ball control.
serve over the net.
Yeah.
I was 15 years old. I couldn't serve over the net. Because in tennis, we serve under. Like we serve, everything has a top spin. I serve over under the net for 2.5 months straight. But that was what triggered me. I was like, oh, really? Coming from being really good at tennis, that broke my heart when I was 15. I'm highly competitive. So I needed something. And I had a love-hate relationship with volleyball for like 9 months. I was in the gym like 8 hours a day. I took every single under 12, under 13, under 14. I was through all the practices. I would get to the gym, I think like at 3:30, and I would leave like at 11:30.
And I believe it. I don't even think you're exaggerating. And I hope everyone knows she's not exaggerating at all. Like she's so serious. She's
I am. That's definitely. It was, and also my home was really bad, so I didn't want to be home.
Right.
Yeah. So when I say that makes sense, sport saved my life, I mean it. It really did.
Wow. And I don't think that's uncommon for a lot of young girls either. And like, you know, going back, you talked about like your transformative age being when you were in Venezuela, and a lot of people say your transformative age is like under the age of 6, say it, whatever it is. But honestly, I think as females, we can all agree, like your middle school age is so transformative, building that self-confidence, finding your passions and things like that. So, and I also feel like we have so many like core memories in our middle school days of like, oh, I remember that so vividly. Like you talking about your first day in Italy and how you remember it like as if it was yesterday. Right. How do you feel like that just transformed your character now, I guess? Like talk about your confidence now, your attitude towards life. Like obviously you've had to do a lot of rebuilding since it was really hard in those years. So talk about that a little bit.
So I see it as different phases. Mainly if we wanted to group them together, there would be 3 during the lifetime. I see the, you know, under 18 as one phase in which you're kind of, everything is new. You're excited. You don't know, you know, like you're learning, your nervous system is not even complete until you're 24 years old. Like we're transforming until we reach that after college age. So you know, I see that phase as an exploratory phase where you're curious about a lot of things and you're, you know, excited. And unfortunately for me, I was presented with a lot of adversity. I saw things that probably weren't very age appropriate and that weren't supposed to be seen by a person of my age. And I was lucky that the choices I made didn't have repercussions to who I am today, permanent repercussions. Like, I didn't choose to do drugs. I didn't choose to get into a wrong path even when I was a model. Like I think I kind of swerved. I made my mistakes for sure, big ones. But I think overall, if we were to put them on a scale, the mistakes I made didn't outweigh the right choices I made, because I think I didn't have a lot of love at home. I sought the confirmation and the validation from my teachers and my professors and my coaches. So they were the thing that I would look up to and say, like, did I do that right? Like, oh my gosh, tell me that you're proud of me, or tell me that I'm good. So that was good in a way. It has its collateral effects. Sometimes your innocence doesn't match when an adult with bad intentions, it's, in the position of power to either benefit you or hurt you. Not everyone's going to make the choice to help you, unfortunately, but that's just part of nature. And it's part of the humanity that we live in. Hopefully we one day are able to outweigh the good and the bad. But those years were, majority of them were very painful for me. And then I got to like the stage where I had to learn about me as an individual. I was angry for a very long time. I was very, very upset with the world. I was like, screw everyone, everyone's evil, everyone sucks, the world sucks. Like I went through the stage of hatred towards the universe that I lived. And when I was in my 20s, and I would say my entire 20s, I spent understanding who I am, who do I want to be. As a kid, I remember making lists. Like when my mom would do something, I would be like, I don't want to be like that. And like she would do something, and she told me exactly what to be. And I remember choosing, almost like if you go to do a vision board, I kind of like pieced together who I wanted to be. I'm like, I'm going to be a great athlete. I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to be a good friend. I'm not going to stab people in the back. Like I kind of learned the things that were done to me. And I went like, I don't like that. Or I really like that. Like I love people that were well-spoken. I love people that were educated. I love people that were complex in their presence. I loved women that were beautiful and that were also intelligent and that were also handy and they could put together a furniture piece. So I love that side.
Amen.
So I kind of like had to piece together ideologically those things during my teenage years. And then I think in my 20s, I really started to go through, who am I? What are my values? Who do I want to be? Am I behaving in a coherent way? If I'm saying I am loyal, am I doing the things that are required by the loyalty value tag, right? And I went through all that. During our 20s or 30s, we go through that often as women. And I had a really hard time accepting the complexity of it. I wanted to be, for a long time when I had that culture switch, I was like, I just want to be one thing. I want to be this, and I just want to fit here. And I just want to be like, why am I having so many identity crises, culture crisis? Like I had so many things that I just didn't want to be, but I was. And I had to come to terms with that in the kind of like, I think in the stage that I am now in my life. And I like to think that once we are complete with this stage of our life, we become on the other end, the person that actually holds the power to help someone else. So maybe later in my 30s and early in my 40s, I'll be like, I'm really successful now. How can I change somebody else's life?
Right.
And I think that's kind of like the circle that I see in a woman's life happening.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. And so even with all that, going into, you moved to the United States, you met Jarrett, and we've talked about Jarrett a few times. For everyone that doesn't know, her husband is Jarrett Elliott, the head coach of the University of Texas Volleyball team. And she moved to the U.S., she met Jarrett, and you guys kind of collaborated and created what many people might know. I've kind of taken the volleyball world by storm, soccer world, gymnastics world, basketball. Everyone's wearing TIY ties, which you are the founder of. So talk about how all those things kind of went into you creating that business.
So I was going to study neurosurgery. So going back to that.
That's crazy, by the way.
Crazy. Just subtle flex, Azhani. Subtle flex. I was going to study neurosurgery.
Well, when I had to choose my career, right? I was really good at like school. I love school. I love learning.
Yeah.
So my thought process behind choosing neurosurgery, there is an explanation. I'm always the person that chooses the hardest thing. So I went down the list about what are the hardest things that women can accomplish. I was like mechanical engineering, physics. Okay, done that. I got into those universities. I started to do that. And then I was like, wait a minute. There is like a 6% female presence in the neurosurgery department around the world. And I was like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon.
That's crazy logic.
So yeah, speak about, like I choose what's often the hardest thing. And I was dead on set. And I had the dream of being somewhere in the medical field since I was like 4 years old.
Right.
I would look at like dead animals and like I would look at I love understanding how things work, especially when they're at some point alive. So, and that was very stimulating to me because I lived in nature. So I would observe so many things that were incredible that I could not comprehend as a kid, living on an island, like full of things that were, unique to it. But that was my everyday world. Anyhow, when I moved to the US, and Jared and I started dating, we met, of course, because of volleyball. I reached out to him when he won the championship in 2012. I was moving here. I came to visit in the spring of 13, but not speaking English. I didn't understand. I kept looking for volleyball clubs. But everything kept popping up was like clubs, like under 18 clubs.
Right.
Club definition.
Yeah, right.
Volleyball club. So coincidence, universe, however you want to call it, all the articles were about him because he won in 2012. And
right.
I was like, you know what? Like he's got to know something. So I sent him a Facebook message.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, hi, volleyball, help, Italy. So he responded and he's
to your future husband.
Well, yes. And he was like, yeah, you're too old.
Yeah.
I was like, what? So that's how we connected. And that was like in the spring of 2013. He was incredibly helpful from the get-go. And on his side, it's kind of like funny hearing his side of the story because he's like, yeah, like I didn't even like think about like, no way.
Sure, Jarrett.
That's what I say.
Yeah, right.
But anyhow, he was like, yeah, you're too old. I'm so sorry. Like you cannot play volleyball here. There is not a pro league. You have to like play a different sport. And he was very helpful. He's like, the NCAA is he explained to me from A to Z. And I was like, oh, I see. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I was like, oh, well, whatever. I'm going to go to the community college because it's only like $600 to get my core classes. That is the same if I go to Harvard or MIT or any school. I can just transfer in. I was also explained that side, by the way. I didn't know. So I was just like, okay, I can be done with volleyball. At that point, I had been playing for 8 years in the Italian league. And I just made a choice. I was like, okay, I can be done. And that was hard. There was no way that I would have been done with volleyball then. Right. I was bouncing off the walls, going crazy at home. But, there was a lot of adjustment there. And for 2 years, we did long distance. I was in Houston. I was, finishing I did 3 semesters in Houston and 1 semester commuting from Austin to Houston. But the day of the deadline for the University of Texas, which I hadn't considered, I had no idea what it was. Like, I was like, like the state school? I was like, no. So I had 3 jobs at the time in Houston. I was shadowing neurosurgeons in the morning at Memorial Hermann from like 4 a.m. to like 7:30.
You were serious about the neurosurgery.
I was.
You were serious. Wow.
And I was going to class from like 7:30 to 1, and then going to coach like a middle school for volleyball, and then going to coach club that night. Majority of my weekdays were like that. And he called me the morning of the deadline, and he said, I'm really excited to know if you got admitted. Like, today's the deadline, and I'm really excited for you to see if you get admitted and you can move to Austin. And I was like, huh? I was like, I will be right back, and we'll talk tonight. So that day I applied to the University of Texas, and I ended up getting in as a transfer student. And that's how I ended up in Austin. You know, like, we hadn't had talks about, okay, what are we doing? I was set. I was going to go to an Ivy League school or to Stanford, you know, for medical school. And that day he rocked my world.
Yeah.
I had to choose, do I want to be very successful and sit in my very nice penthouse by myself when I'm like 35? Or do I want someone like who is endearing and loving and caring, and that can give me what I've always yearned. Right. And I had a meeting with myself that day, very long. So that was the deciding day that I was like, you know what? Okay, I don't have to be a neurosurgeon. And that took a long time to let go, like a couple of years. But when I moved to Austin, I finished my my undergrad at Texas in like 3 semesters. And then when I graduated in 2017, I was lucky enough to meet a fellow entrepreneur that founded a beard product company. It's called Beard Brand. His name is Eric. And he kind of like mentored me to the early stages of a business and the website and the PNG and deleting background, putting product photography and all that stuff. So I didn't think I was good enough to be an entrepreneur. I don't like selling things. Right. I'm terrified of asking people like, hey, can you buy it? I don't, that's something I'm working on. But I did slow and steady, took more and more part into the company. And one day, I think I just had the instinct of, I know the product very well. I can figure things out. Like, I'm just, half of the job is figuring things out, right? Like, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And how do you edit the video and put it on TikTok? And just the product, it's, you know, was developed to be a superior product, to be an accessory, to be almost like a Lululemon of the hair ties. You know, something that when you wear, it's so superior than anything else that you're just like, it sells itself, which has been easy for me. So all I do is I send it to people. I'm like, just try and give me feedback, and they love it. So I'm very lucky on that side. But the feedback from the women that wear it, or the people with long hair that wear it, has been incredible. And that has given me confidence to, you know, build a brand, see the community around it, come together and kind of like spot the knot. So I took ownership of the entire company back in 2018. And that was so scary. You know, I've been running it since September 3rd, 2018. And
you had only been in America for 5 years at that point. That's crazy. Wow.
Yes.
That is.
This year, you know, October 1st will be my 10th year anniversary living here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so cool. And Andrea, I met Andrea. Literally. I was going to say, I met Andrea because she had a booth at one of the big tournaments, volleyball tournaments. And Andrea, I don't know where we were at, Z. I think we were playing at Arkansas, but it was Dig Pink. And so they gave us all the pink TIY ties. And that's the first time I used them. And I was like, this is the next best thing. And so going back to what you said about like it sells themselves, I told my mom, I'm like, I have 2 younger sisters. And of course, I'm like, they need a Easter present for my mom. I'm like, you got to get these TIY ties, Mom. And they don't wear anything other than the TIY ties now. So they're locked.
No one does. Everyone wears them. It's really, it truly is the superior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like when people hear about it, it's almost like too good to be true for a hair tie. So we're fighting a lot the hair tie apathy, and I'm learning so much about what it means to be a niche product. We're doing a humongous rebranding right now that it's going to bring some exciting news later on this year and early in the 2024 year. So yeah, it's growing, and I can't believe it. We just had our first hire is our copywriter, is a girl that I coached in Houston who went to Pratt University.
Cool.
And kind of like wrapping up her university career, we've kept in touch. Her family and I have always been, talking every now and then. And she manifested to me. She said, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to apply to jobs. I'm having a hard time. Her family is clearly from Texas. And I just threw it out there. I said, Avery, I need help. This is growing so much, and you're a great writer. She's also a screenwriter. And I said, would you take the leap of faith and just move to Austin and help me? And she did. So we're working right now. It's at all women owned, and our designer is a female. Everyone around us, it's a woman, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We're doing appreciation lives this month because of Mental Health Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. So we're just hopping on random 5 to 10 minute Instagram lives. So if you guys want to be part of it, I would love to have you.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, we're there. So just to like rewind a bit, Andrea, I feel like the part of that story that kind of was maybe the most amazing to me is that you chose to take a step back from something that you would have been insanely successful at, right? But knowing that like there was probably more out there for you, like knowing that Jarrett, like living with Jarrett and being married to Jarrett was probably going to give you more of that like fulfillment that you were looking for. So I guess I don't know. I guess I just think it's cool that now that with the TIY Ties that it's really come full circle and you've made a career that you probably never expected a career to be. So I guess what I'm saying with that is like, talk about what it was like being an entrepreneur in America, not speaking the English and probably like not having a lick of business experience either. Right?
Yes. So, I had to overcome, and this is where I think the universe just puts you into situations that you have to make a choice. I mean, we make choices since the moment we wake up in the morning, but I was terrified of asking people for anything, which takes me to my former trauma. Everything that I would ask as a young female was met with a no as an answer. So at some point I stopped asking, and it was difficult then to flip the switch and start asking people for things that even from the minimal, like, hey, could you pass me that? I will get up and go get it myself. I was deeply afraid of getting no as an answer, which then in a funny way resulted into a deep resilience when it comes down to like overcoming things. I'm like, okay, I lowered the bar so much when it came down to achievements that I ended up overachieving in anything that I put my mind to. I don't know if that makes sense. I stopped, I never gave myself a good job pat on the shoulder. And I went like, okay, what's the hardest thing I can accomplish? Then that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And never once I took the time to say, oh, that was good. Like that was a good job. So going back to what it meant to be an entrepreneur, it meant to listen to others, tell me what was wrong, or how to go about things. But I really did expand, and I constantly do. So I ask, what do you think about this? And I am actually listening to what they're saying, right? Instead of thinking that I have the answer, because I didn't know how to. I had to ask because I had no idea. So if I wanted to be successful, which by nature, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I don't care how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out. I had to encounter one of the biggest fears that I had was asking for help or asking for an opinion or relying on someone else's expertise, which wasn't my cup of tea. I was an only child who was told no all the time, and I was not used to cooperating very well with others. So I think I've come a long way when it comes down to thinking, asking, and figuring things out, which has led me to understand that a bigger group of people can get so much more done and give more fulfillment to it.
Yeah. And that's really interesting
Yeah,
because I
so
feel like
good.
now in going back to you're a coach's wife, and I think me and Maddie kind of know what that looks like from our coach's wife. Like that's just a whole different level of trust and patience, and he's always gone and you guys are always traveling. And I know you don't hardly ever miss a game. Like you're driving up to West Virginia with the team. And I also think one of the best things about that is like all of the girls on that team who I can testify this because I know them, they love you and they adore you. And even Zoe Fleck, we had her on a few months ago, and she, on your birthday, posts all these things about you and they admire you so much. And so I just really think it's interesting the relationship you have with all those girls, as well as being in the position that you're in. So
yeah, it's an interesting position because, you know, Jared and I have a big age difference. I'm probably closer to being your older sister than, you know, anything else. But I don't have family, as I said before. I don't have a lot of people that I can rely on, but I see those kids, those young women, when we meet their families, when we, you know, embrace them into our family. And I know it's like hard because a lot of people have a perception of the University of Texas and the program, and you know what, you know, we all travel with our imagination and have an impression of someone when we don't know them.
right.
We really do truly internally bond with one another, and once you're part of the family, I will fight anyone for you. So it's really interesting because, you know, you have to channel your energies, and you have to channel your attentions. No one's a superhuman here. We all make mistakes. And the way I bond with the girls is making sure they know my home is open to them. I can always make them a cooked meal if they're like homesick, or they want lasagna, they want Italian food, or they want Venezuelan food. Like I want to make sure they're loved in a way that I never was. So it's like, you guys are away from home. You don't have anyone. Yeah, you have your teammates, but you're in that stage of your life that you don't know. You're like, oh my gosh, like, do I do things because I'm peer pressure, or do I do like what I really want to do? So I want to make sure that everyone that it's in our program knows that I'm there for them, whether they need it or not. But I care for them. It's so fun to see them, you know, overcome their insecurities and overcome their challenges and be put in situations of hardship. You know, only sixth play is one of the most competitive gyms in the country. So it's really hard adapting to all those things on top of having a boyfriend and going to class and, you know, having to juggle all those things. So we're just an extension of their family. I love to get to know the parents, and it makes me happy. You know, sometimes if they need something, they know I'm there. Even if, for example, they want to have a piece of furniture delivered to the house, and they can be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if they're going to be at the door, whatever that might be. You know, it's kind of like become my family. I love them so much. For the past 9 years, I think I've missed like 5 games. And
I'll say this: you're the best dressed at every game you go to. There's not one gym that you are not the best dressed in.
Well, I gotta give that to the Italian culture. I loved learning from Italians quality of craft and how to put together materials and fibers and things that they don't have to cost you a lot of money. My favorite places to go are places where I can just get to choose the style, like Goodwill. And I found, if you know your fabrics and you know your things, you can go to Goodwill and put an outfit that people are like,
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They taught you well.
I
We're gonna do that, Z.
I don't love, like I worked in Milan for a while, and I loved, I take pride in putting in an outfit that is good quality, doesn't have, Gucci or Prada all over it just because I can afford it. I challenge myself to be like, you know what, let's get something that is unique and that is different, but is good quality and is going to last me for a long time. And it just looks like $1 million. And I often, so I have pictures of our engagement, and I got the skirt of our engagement at Goodwill, $5.99.
Wow.
That's cool. That's a cool story.
That's awesome.
I'll text you the
Send the link. For sure.
Yeah, we'll need them for the Instagram clip, Azhani. The pictures. Okay, Andrea, to switch gears. And we asked permission obviously before this, but Andrea did experience an eating disorder in her past. And, Andrea, just to give you credit, and I know that you've worked through this for years now to be able to talk about this, but Z and I played, Z, I hope you don't care if I'm sharing this story. I didn't ask you for permission. But we're female college athletes where, our bodies are on display every single game, every practice. And I think all girls to some extent struggle with insecurities. And I remember one night, Z, we were both up really late and we were just in our feels or something and just being really mean to our bodies, really mean. And that happens to a lot of females, I know. And fortunately, I haven't personally struggled with an eating disorder, but I know how that can happen so easily to a lot of young women. And it sucks. And I would love for you to share as much or as little about your story, and maybe someone can take something really great away from it.
Yeah, so my eating disorder started right immediately when my sexual abuse was over. So I think it was an emotional coping mechanism. I never saw a professional for it, but it kept being triggered by my mom, which is the underlying character of my story. She kept telling me, you don't fit in your jeans anymore. And I put muscle very easily on. And I switched sports from tennis to volleyball. And we know that volleyball players have bigger legs and bigger thighs. We got to jump. So I did have a really big jump on the court. So, I was growing into a body from a 14-year-old to a 16-year-old. And I remember these remarks being made by the very own person that was supposed to, tell me that things were okay and that, that was normal, that I got my period for the first time, that that those things were natural changes in my body, and I would see more coming. So that was the first time I encountered a relationship with food that wasn't healthy. So I was bulimic for 10 years. I was trying to be an athlete. All my entire professional volleyball career, I was bulimic. Because I was also a model, and those two worlds don't really collide very well, especially in Italy.
No.
In Italy, you have a lot of high fashion, and that high fashion can be really cruel. I was a model for haute couture, so you had to be like a zero. I wasn't a zero, not even close. It was a combination of factors. I started, I would vomit 3 times a day. It was awful. And I am lucky enough not, fast forward 10 years, I moved to the US. I was still severely under, my bulimia. And I must give credits to Jerry for that. He also helped me, understand that my emotional response would not need a binge eating and then, vomiting after because I was upset. So there were a lot of things that triggered that. I think I was very mean, to myself. I people saw me as, oh my gosh, you're so perfect and you look great in a bikini. But what I saw was not what those people were saying. I think especially because I knew I wasn't healthy. So I felt almost like I was lying to people, which goes against my values. You know, I don't like to lie. And that's something that felt not only physically harmful, but also psychologically taxing, because, you know, I had to be in a party and it was really hard. It was an addiction that I could, you know, you can't get rid of. You have to eat.
Right.
So that was very interesting part of my life. I remember that since I were a kid, I would have like conversations in the mirror with myself, mainly when I had to learn a new language because I didn't want to be judged for the way I spoke. So I would try to imitate people. So I would like go to the mirror and practice.
Wow.
So I remember, you know, like in my lowest low, I literally, it was an afternoon. I finished like, I think in 14, 15. And after having an episode, I had it. I was sick and tired of vomiting. And I remember just like, literally, this is probably very graphic, head over the toilet. I finished vomiting and I was bawling my eyes out. And I like sat, like I would sit in the vanity, like in front of the mirror. And I looked at myself in the eyeballs and I'm like, you're done. We are done here. Like I literally had that conversation with myself.
Wow.
And I never knew what it felt to be hungry. Like I had no regulation of, okay, I'm hungry, I am gonna eat now. Like my stomach never burned for like 14 years of my life.
Wow.
Like 12 to 14 years.
Wow.
So I had to relearn that. And I read so many books about, you know, what is the cycle that someone encounters. Probably since I was like 22, I started to like try to fight it unsuccessfully, and it took years to come out of it. So I did a lot of research. I would probably give myself the advice to look for a professional that would help me instead of trying to figure it all out by myself. But I did, like I had so many things going on at the same time with, you know, my PTSD, that to me, the eating disorder was almost like the least of the evils. So that I was like, hey, yeah, whatever, I can figure that out on my own.
Right.
So it was a combination of things. And it was very hard even to develop when I wasn't engaging in the bulimic behavior anymore. I was just like almost on the edge of like, I took down every mirror in my house. I didn't want to see me. And I started to I had to realign when I closed my eyes, what I felt to then what I thought. And then it became a complete healing process when I had my thoughts, my feelings, and what I would see in the mirror, all in the same line. So I did a lot of journaling that was negative journaling. Like I would write down all the things that I wouldn't like, and then I would burn the journal almost like as a cathartic experience. I would do that also as a kid at the end of the year. Like for New Year's, I would like burn whatever I wrote during that year as a like let go. I found definitely very different ways of getting rid of my pain over the years. And that was one of them. I had to relearn the relationship with food. I had to learn, you know, that sometimes peer pressure can really be dangerous. If someone says they're not hungry, like stop pushing for it. Because then you spiral down and you'll have, you know, you never know what someone else is going through. If you encounter a certain behavior in someone of your best friends, say something, just talk to them about it. Like, hey, are you okay? Because it was hard. Like a part of me was screaming for someone to notice. And a part of me was like, no way, they cannot know. They will not love me anymore if they have this or if that I do this. Luckily, you know, I lived with Jared. So he was like, okay, what are we doing? So I had to, right? Like, and I had to come to reality with, I'm struggling. So once I said it, and I'm like, I don't know how to stop. And like, I go off for like 3 months, and then something happens, or like something emotionally shocking happens, and then I go back to it and I feel like a failure. So it's like a full cycle that is psychological, is physical, is mental, and it's also like societal, right? Like you go to a party and the chips and cakes are calling your name.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. So that's kind of like that relationship that I had to have, and that journey took a long time, but definitely it's over. So if anyone needs to talk, or even to send an anonymous letter or whatever it is, I'm here if anyone wants to talk about it.
I love that. And thank you that's not
Thank
easy
you,
to talk
Andrea.
about, easy to share.
No.
So thanks for speaking about that. And it's as hard as that all
Z.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was like saying, as hard as that all was, you've turned out to be this incredible woman, and you're probably still dealing with a lot of that stuff, but you're influencing a whole generation, and all those girls at Texas and everyone you've come across, me and Maddie included. And so I think with that, I'll lead into my last question. I don't know if Maddie has another one. Do you have another one, Mad?
I was just going to say that I was reading a book last week on like alcoholism, and how the stigma around alcoholism it's so real in America, and it's viewed as this, like, it's this illness, and it really is an illness, but so is eating. An eating disorder is an illness, you know? And so you being able to say, like, I am sick, like, I really am sick, and I can't do this by myself. Like, I feel like there's so many girls out there who, I mean, friends of mine, friends of ours who were like, girl, you know, I want to help you, but it's just that where they have to finally see, like, okay, I need help. So again, thank you for sharing. That's like not easy at all, but so helpful to so many.
Yeah. And a lot of that, you know, stigma comes from accepting or rejecting the idea of beauty in society. You know, I wanted to be as skinny and as, you know, thin as all the other double zeros were around me when I was modeling, but mainly, you know, I wanted to fit in the jeans that I felt when I was 14, because my mom made me feel guilty that I wouldn't fit in them anymore when I was 16. So maybe like self-check before making certain, you know, remarks when you're to yourself and to your friends when they are having maybe a hard time with their own body. It's really good to talk about it, you know, like let it out and just say, like, you know what, I really don't like the way my shoulder blade looks on that side. And maybe you can tell that to someone that you trust. And shockingly, a lot of people will not even see those things that we beat ourselves up for. So.
Okay, Andrea, before I ask you, we always ask all of our guests their best piece of advice to everyone listening. But before you answer that, if there's anything else you want to share, talk about, feel free. But then finish it up with your best piece of advice.
Unless you guys have any other questions, my best piece of advice, I gotta think on that one for a second.
Everyone always does.
I know it's hard, but to be vulnerable, like 100% vulnerable, it's probably the best advice I could ever give anyone, from the entrepreneur world to the athlete world to the female world to, you know, someone that has come from a lot of struggles. I think being 100% transparently vulnerable if someone hurts you, it says more about them than it says about you. Because when you are vulnerable, you're exposed, and it's almost like they're kicking someone when they're down. And that says way more about them than it says about you. So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from my life so far. Don't put up a front, or don't put up some sort of like, I'm going to show you I'm this and I'm that. Instead of just like, I think that leads to them being truly who you are over time. And people will see that, the ones that care about you and the people that are alike will see themselves into that and naturally gravitate to it. So vulnerability is a superpower, not a weakness. So I would say that's my biggest piece of advice to anyone that is watching, or they feel insecure, or they feel sad, or anything like that.
I love it.
Thank you so much. That was so good. That was some Brene Brown wisdom right there. And I'm a Brene Brown stan. So, oh, Andrea, this has seriously been our pleasure. I know we told you this at the beginning, but Z and I were like through the roof when you said you would do this. So, if you're listening, buy your TIY tie. That's a little plug for TIY Ties. And we cannot wait to see the rebrand. I'm so excited, and I will be a buyer immediately. Andrea, thank you. We appreciate it
so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
I feel like we were friends before, but now I feel like we're pretty close. Don't tell Jarrett, but me and you are like this now.
we won't tell him.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Oh, thank you.